when rescuers found the baby elephant standing over her mother's body. They had no idea the trauma had stolen something even more precious than her family. But what they discovered 2 weeks later would reveal why this tiny orphan saw every human as her mother's killer, and why only the most innocent voices on earth could reach her broken heart. The early morning mist hung heavy over the Sheldrick Wildlife Trust Elephant Orphanage in Nairobi as keeper Edwin Lucici made his rounds through the nursery compound. At 62 years old, Edwin had spent 40 years caring for orphaned elephants. He had raised over 300 babies who had lost their mothers to poaching, drought, and fights between humans and animals. He thought he had seen every kind of elephant sadness, but nothing had prepared him for what waited in the isolation unit that cool September morning. Kadiki lay completely still on the soft hay bedding. The 7-month-old female elephant had curled her tiny body into the tightest ball possible. Her wrinkled gray skin hung loose, no longer tight over healthy baby fat. Her eyes, cloudy from infection and half-sealed shut, stared at the concrete wall without blinking. Yellow goo stuck to the thin hair around her face, crusty and thick. But it was not the medical problems that scared Edwin most. It was how absolutely still she remained, like a statue carved from stone. Edwin knelt beside her pen, his old weathered hands gripping the cold metal bars. Kadiki had arrived at the sanctuary 9 days earlier. Kenya Wildlife Service rangers had carried her in after finding her standing next to her mother's dead body in Tsavo East National Park. Poachers had killed the mother elephant for her ivory tusks, leaving the baby to wander the hot savanna alone. The veterinarians guessed she had been by herself for at least 3 days before someone found her. The trauma showed itself in ways the team had never seen before. Most orphaned elephants fought against help at first, then slowly started to trust their human caretakers. But Kadiki was different. She was not fighting at all. She was vanishing right before their eyes, fading away like morning fog under the sun. The baby turned away from every bottle of special elephant milk, moving her head with what looked like a choice, a decision to refuse. She showed zero interest in the other baby elephants playing nearby. She did not care about the sounds and smells of her new home. Most scary was how she acted when anyone tried to comfort her. Headkeeper Angela Sheldrick had tried everything that usually worked with hurt babies. She wrapped Kadiki in soft blankets. She played recordings of mother elephants calling to their young. She even brought in Loijuk, a gentle 4-year-old female who had mothered several orphans before. But Kadiki pulled away from every touch, every try at connection. When Loijuk wrapped her trunk around the baby in the traditional elephant greeting, Kadiki pressed herself against the far wall, shaking all over like a leaf in strong wind. The veterinary team had put tubes in her veins to give her fluids so she would not dry out completely. But blood tests showed terrible things. Her body was filled with stress chemicals. Her organs were starting to fail. The eye infection probably came from dirty water during her days alone. Despite strong medicines, the infection kept getting worse. The doctors were not sure about her eyes, but they thought Kadiki's sight might be damaged forever. Edwin watched the baby's shallow breathing, her small chest barely moving up and down. Then he noticed something that made his heart feel like it was breaking in half. Kadiki was making a sound he had never heard from an elephant before. It was high and thin, almost silent, like air whistling through a tiny crack. The sound came from deep inside her chest. It took him several long moments to understand what he was hearing. The baby was calling for her mother, over and over and over. But why was this cry so different from any other orphan sadness? And what did it tell them about just how broken her heart truly was? Dr. Kieran Avery walked toward Kadiki's pen, carrying test results that would change everything they thought they knew about the baby's condition. At 47 years old, Dr. Avery had treated thousands of wild animals across 3 continents. But the papers in his hands showed something he had only read about in science books, never seen with his own eyes. Edwin looked up as the veterinarian came closer. He could see an unusual look on his friend's face. It was not the blank, professional expression doctors wore when giving bad news. This was something closer to deep, deep sadness, the kind that reached down into your bones. Dr. Avery opened the file and started explaining what the team had found during their checkup the night before. The eye infection was much worse than they first thought. Kadiki was not partly blind, like they believed. She was completely blind, unable to see anything at all. The infection had destroyed the clear parts of her eyes beyond any chance of fixing. She would live in total darkness for the rest of her life. But this was not the most heartbreaking thing they discovered. During the physical exam, Dr. Avery had noticed strange scars on Kadiki's legs and trunk. They had put her to sleep with medicine so they could look closer. What they found told a story more sad than simple abandonment, more terrible than just being left alone. The scars formed patterns that, combined with when her mother died, revealed something almost too awful to believe. Kadiki had not simply wandered away after the poaching. She had tried to defend her mother. The baby elephant, barely 7 months old and completely helpless, had fought against the poachers. The marks on her trunk showed she had tried to push them away, tried to stand between the attackers and her mother. She had been there for the whole horrible event, too young to understand what was happening, too small to save the one being who was her entire world. Dr. Avery explained that the eye infection probably happened during this fight. Someone had likely kicked Kadiki or hit her, causing damage right away. Then the damage got worse during 3 days of walking through dusty, dirty areas without her herd to protect and clean her. She had gone blind while searching desperately for her dead mother, stumbling through the hot landscape, calling and calling with no answer, coming back. What this meant was huge and terrible. Kadiki was not simply sad or scared. She was experiencing what animal doctors called compound trauma, layers of hurt stacked on top of each other like bricks in a wall. She had watched violence happen to her mother. She had failed to protect her. She had lost her. Then she lost her sight while trying to find her again. In the baby's mind, all these terrible things were connected, tied together in one awful knot. Every time humans came near her, she probably remembered the attack all over again. Every sound brought back memories of that terrible day, playing in her mind like a movie she could not turn off. Angela Sheldrick joined them, having heard the conversation from nearby. She looked at Kadiki with new understanding, seeing the baby elephant in a completely different way now. Kadiki was not refusing food because she was simply sad. She was refusing to accept a world where her mother no longer existed, where darkness was permanent and forever, where the beings trying to help her looked and sounded and smelled like those who had destroyed her family. The team stood in silence, watching the tiny elephant's chest move up and down with difficult breaths. They had saved hundreds of orphans over the years, bringing them back from the edge of death. But none had ever carried this particular weight of trauma and loss, this specific combination of physical and emotional wounds. Edwin finally spoke the question they were all thinking, the words hanging in the air like smoke. If Kadiki could not tell the difference between her rescuers and her attackers, if she could not accept that her mother was truly gone and never coming back, how could they possibly reach her before it was too late? For 6 more terrible days, Kadiki continued her slow slide toward death. Her weight dropped to numbers that made the doctors shake their heads. The veterinary team had no choice but to keep giving her food and water through tubes in her veins to keep her alive. Each morning brought the same heartbreaking scene. The baby elephant stayed curled in her defensive ball. That silent high whistle kept coming from her chest as she called endlessly for a mother who would never, could never Answer: the miracle came from the most unlikely place, and in the most unexpected way imaginable. On the 14th day of Kadiki's stay, a group of school children from a Nairobi primary school arrived for their monthly tour of the sanctuary. These visits were part of the Trust's program to teach young Kenyans about protecting wild animals and the real cost of poaching. The children, aged 8 to 10, walked through the compound with their teacher, looking at the different orphaned elephants and learning each one's rescue story. When the group reached Kadiki's isolation unit, their teacher, Mrs. Wanjiru Kimathi, began explaining the baby's condition in simple words the children could understand. She told them about the little elephant who had lost her mother and could not see anymore. As she spoke, something extraordinary happened that no one could have predicted. One child, a small girl named Aisha, who looked about 9 years old, began to cry. Soft, quiet tears rolled down her brown cheeks as she stared at Kadiki through the observation window. Mrs. Kimathi moved to comfort her, reaching out with gentle hands. But Aisha shook her head no. Instead, she did something that broke every safety rule the sanctuary had. She began to sing. The song was simple, a traditional Swahili lullaby that mothers across East Africa have sung to their children for hundreds of years. The words meant, "Sleep, child, sleep, mother is here." Aisha's voice was pure and clear, not trained by any teacher, but filled with real emotion that came straight from her heart. Edwin had been standing nearby, watching the tour group. He was about to stop the girl and move the children away from the pen when he noticed something that made him freeze in place like a statue. For the first time since arriving at the sanctuary, Kadiki was moving. The baby elephant's ears, which had stayed flat against her head in constant fear, slowly moved forward. Her trunk, curled protectively under her body for 2 weeks, began to uncurl bit by bit. Dr. Avery appeared beside Edwin. Both men stood completely still, unable to believe what their eyes were showing them. Aisha kept singing, her young voice filling the observation area with the gentle melody. Kadiki's head lifted up from the ground, turning toward where the sound came from. The high-pitched whistle that had become her constant cry slowly got quieter and quieter. Angela Sheldrick came running, drawn by the unusual quiet and the gathering crowd. She stood beside the men, watching in complete amazement as the baby elephant responded to something for the first time in 2 weeks. But it was not just any sound or any person. It was a child's voice, young and gentle, and completely unthreatening, singing about a mother's presence. As Aisha's song ended, the whole group stood in total silence. Nobody moved. Nobody even seemed to breathe. Kadiki stayed in her new position, head up, ears forward, trunk partly stretched out, as if trying to understand what she had just heard. The question hanging in the air was clear to everyone standing there. Why had a child's voice reached Kadiki when weeks of expert care had completely failed? And could this unexpected discovery become the key to saving her life? What happened next opened completely new possibilities for saving Kadiki's life. Dr. Avery immediately understood what they were seeing. The baby elephant, hurt so badly by adult humans who had killed her mother, could somehow tell the difference between adult and child voices. To Kadiki's sharp senses and traumatized mind, children meant something totally different from the adults she had learned to fear with every fiber of her being. Mrs. Kimathi agreed to help right away, excited to be part of something so important. The sanctuary started a care plan nobody had ever tried before. Each day, small groups of children from different Nairobi schools would visit Kadiki's pen under very careful watch. They would sit outside her space and sing, talk, or simply read stories out loud. The children were taught never to touch the elephant, never to make quick movements, but just to be there with their voices and their presence. The change was slow, but impossible to deny. Within 3 days of children visiting, Kadiki began drinking small amounts of milk, though only when a child's voice was nearby during feeding time. Angela Sheldrick would hold the bottle while a young volunteer spoke in soothing tones close by. The baby seemed to understand that these small humans carried no danger, no violence in their hearts. By the end of the second week, Kadiki was drinking full bottles and had started to gain weight back. Her body healed faster and faster, though her blindness stayed permanent and forever. But even more amazing, her emotional state shifted like clouds parting after a storm. The constant stress whistle stopped completely. Her body relaxed. She began making small movements around her pen, using her trunk to map the space like reading with her fingers, growing more confident each day. The sanctuary worked with a local school to create a volunteer program with rules and schedules. Students would apply to be Kadiki's friends, promising to visit regularly where they would keep her company through storytelling, singing, and gentle conversation. The program became so popular that more children wanted to help than they had room for. Kids wrote heartfelt letters about why they wanted to help the blind baby elephant, pouring their hearts onto paper. One volunteer, 12-year-old David Omondi, became especially devoted to Kadiki's care. He visited every single day after school, bringing books to read out loud and teaching the elephant to know his voice from all the others. Under his patient guidance, Kadiki began to play for the first time since the attack, exploring toys with her trunk and even trying the playful behaviors typical of healthy elephant babies. 6 months after arriving at the sanctuary, Kadiki had gained over 300 pounds of healthy weight. The team successfully moved her into the nursery herd with the other orphans. Though blind, she moved through her environment with confidence, depending on the sounds and smells around her to build a map in her mind. The sanctuary installed special paths she could feel with her feet and sound markers to help her move around by herself. The children who had saved her life through their innocent presence kept coming to visit. They became junior conservation ambassadors who shared Kadiki's story in schools across Kenya. Their message was powerful and clear. Even the smallest voice could make a difference. Even the gentlest heart could heal the deepest wounds. Kadiki's story proved something the sanctuary team had never fully understood before. Sometimes trauma runs so deep that knowledge and experience cannot reach it. Sometimes healing requires not the wisdom that comes with age, but the pure, simple compassion of a child's heart. And sometimes, the beings we try to save end up saving us instead, teaching us lessons about bouncing back, learning to trust again, and the life-changing power of innocent love that no textbook could ever contain. In the end, it was not medicine or science that saved Kadiki. It was something far more powerful. It was the voice of a child, reminding a broken baby that somewhere in this world, gentleness still existed.